Hello, all my JavaScript friends. This is TheVirtuoid, aka Mike Smith, and this is our factory game. So last time we covered the stats section of the screen. That would be the stats information at the top. There's the cursor position, the stats cache, and the stats inventory. Now, I really didn't go over the cursor position of the cache very much because they're basically like 10 lines long. There's nothing really there. The big thing was the information and the inventory. So that's part one of the three pieces of the screen here. So now we're going to look at part number two, and that's going to be the store, which is the yellow part on the right-hand side here. Now, to remind you of what goes on here, the store gives me a list of all the different pieces that I can purchase, from conveyors to extractors to purifiers to combinators. And to purchase it, all I have to do is be able to click on one of these buttons. So for instance, if I wanted to buy a straight conveyor, I will click on the 5 here, and that will give me or allow me to purchase a straight for a conveyor, and as you can tell, that ends up in the inventory section on the left hand side. Or an extractor, I can purchase an extractor, I can purchase a purifier, I can purchase a combinator, and each time I do that, the information is sent over to the inventory, and it adds in the inventory. And also what will happen is that if I don't have enough money, then that button will be ghosted out. So let me just buy a whole bunch of these big combinators here, and eventually we got to $2.2 million, and that is more than the 1.82 million that I have currently in inventory. So that button gets ghosted out. So the store handles all of that. It handles what items in which category are available, what's the cost of those items, and if you're able to purchase that item or not. And basically what happens is that when you do click on a button within the store, it will send two messages over to the game. The first one is the inventory add, in which case it says, hey, this person just purchased a conveyor, so add that over to the inventory. So if I was to purchase another conveyor now from hitting the 6, my inventory now has gone up to 2. The second thing it does is it sends a stat cache message out, and that stat cache message says, "Hey, I have to subtract this amount of cash." So if I clicked on this bottom combinator down here for $305,000, then my cash should disappear by $305,000, and sure enough, it does. And then basically once the cache changes, it will then send a message back over to the store saying, hey, this is the amount of money we have left, disable the buttons if you need to. And that's what will happen if we keep on clicking. Eventually we will run out of money. And that's basically all there is to the store, and there's really just two pieces to the store, because if you take a look at it, let's zoom in a little bit on the store section here. On the conveyor part of the store, there's really two pieces to the store. There's the overall store itself, which is the entire large yellow section, which contains the conveyors, the extractors, purifiers, and combinators. But there's also what's called a store section. And that store section covers each individual piece here, because if you take a look at this, in fact, let me zoom back out here. If you take a look at it, each one of these sections are really exactly the same. I have a name, conveyor, extractor, purifier, combinator. I have a piece of inventory, and I have a purchase price for that piece of inventory. Other than that, they're all exactly the same. So what we've done in the design here is that we have sat there and said, okay, we're going to have a JavaScript file, both the business side and a UI side, that will cover just a section and nothing else. And then we'll have a UI and a business side to cover the entire store. And that's what we're going to take a look at. So let's get over there right now. Okay, let's first of all take a look at the store itself. As you can tell on the left-hand side here, the store has its own little directory, and I've got a store business file and a store UI file. And then, as I've covered in other videos, I basically try to split the business side of the logic, the non-UI side of the logic, with the UI side of the logic. And I also, within store, I have a store section, which has, again, the store section business logic and the store section UIs. But let's take a look at the store first. This is real simple. As you can tell, it's 50 lines. It's really, really simple. The first thing is the store covers absolutely everything. And so I needed for it to be able to sit there and say, what pieces of information am I going to have into the store? Well, basically it's going to be a conveyor, an extractor, a purifier, and a combinator. And I pass to it all the different build classes. So this will allow me to be able to build all the individual pieces of the or individual items within the inventory itself, because each one of these items are part of these build classes. For instance, if we go to conveyor here, let me just go to conveyor itself. Within the symbols of conveyor, I've got a list here of all the different conveyors. If I go to extractor, within the symbols, see, I've got the same thing right here. I've got all the symbols for extractor and so on and so forth. So that will allow me then to be able to extract all the information I need based upon the build class. The constructor is no big deal here. The big thing here is that I go through the store, I go through each of these different stores, and I click on Add Section. And this Add Section down here basically says, okay, you know, what are the 4 different sections we have here for the factory store? And we're going to add those in there. And this is where we do the build class. So we do the new store section name. So we create a new store section, which we'll cover here in just a second. And then we add that, we call the add inventory. And the add inventory then goes through that build class and says, hey, you know, I need to build all the different pieces of the inventory. And then we save that information into our store set. And that's all there is to the stores. And the same thing with the UI here. There's not a whole heck of a lot here, but a couple of things I do want to show to you here. I do have a listing of all the different buildings, and it runs pretty much the same thing. Here are the build classes for each of the different buildings, kind of like we did on the store itself. The preload here is what is called by the game, by Phaser.js, to say, you know, I need to preload up all of the different images. So each of these different store sections, or each of these different builder classes within the different buildings, these different conveyor UIs, extractor UIs have preload options. So for instance, I'm going to conveyor UI, here's the preload, and this loads in the graphic for all the different conveyors. Extractor UI here loads in all the graphics for all of the different extractors, and again, so on and so forth. So if we go back to store UI, we really basically then go to the create section. This again is something that is called from the game itself, saying, okay, I need you to create all this stuff. All right, let's create it. Well, to be able to create it, we go through each of the different stores, and we go to each of the different store sections. We set the DOM, we set a name, we set a building class, and we set a scene. And that basically allows us to then push all that information out to the store section to be able to do whatever magic it does, which again, we'll get to in just a second here. And then finally starts everything up, and everything is really hunky-dory. The big thing here is this little set callback within the store UI that basically calls back to the store saying, hey, you know, if something happens, if something changes, I need you to be able to tell me about it. And the big thing it's going to really need to know is that, you know, do we have an update cache event has occurred? Because we've purchased something from the inventory, and once we purchase something, we've changed the cache. The cache is then reported back over to the store saying, hey, you know, we now have less money than we do. We need to go through all the different systems and be able to disable them. And so that's what this section does here. It will disable all the different purchases. So that's pretty much it for the store UI. Really, really, really simple. In fact, oh yeah, look at this. Ooh, I got something that's commented out. There we go. Obviously something I was testing with earlier. Now, here comes the cool parts. So let's now take a look at the StoreSection JS. Real simple here. Again, the StoreSection JS, let me just bring up the store screen, covers each individual piece of information you have here on, or each individual section of the store: conveyors, extractors, purifiers, and combinators. So let's get back over to our code, take a look at it. No big deal, except that there's two very important pieces of information. The first piece of information here is that we have to add an inventory. When we add the inventory in there, this is where we're going to get the pricing for the inventory, and we're going to set that inventory up with the different pricing, because within the building class of each of these individual sections, we have how much it costs to be able to do it. And not only do we have how much it costs, we have how much it costs based upon different levels, and that's within this data section here. Conveyor straight, curve left, curve right, T-intersection left, T-intersection right, and so on and so forth. The extractors, the combinators, the purifiers have something actually a little bit more than that. They have a huge amount of things, because you can actually upgrade, as we showed you with the information before, you can actually upgrade these different extractors and combinators and all that kind of fun stuff once they get placed upon the world. So we have to not only keep track of how much it's going to cost, but how much it costs and how fast everything works based upon the different levels that you are on. Conveyors don't have that because you don't upgrade conveyors. They just move things along. So that's what the add inventory does. So that adds the inventory into our data center within the store. And then the key here is the purchase building. When we've clicked on that button, we need to know that we have purchased the building. This is when we get the data information. We figure out how much is going to be the cost. We're going to set that inventory back out there, and then we're going to send those two events out to the game: inventory add and stat cache. And again, these are the important things that we have on this system here, saying, hey, I've got to admit, I've got to emit to the game that I've added the inventory and that I added a single piece of inventory and that I've subtracted the cost. And that's basically all there is to it. So then game takes over and does whatever it wants to do. The StoreSection UI, though, is pretty funky. Let's go to the StoreSection UI. It's not funky, but it's pretty easy. Build is the big thing here, because when we build this StoreSection out here, this actually builds the UI itself. And within this UI, the important thing here is that we are trying to save information about this UI. We don't care about the image or anything, but we do care about the button itself, because within the button itself, this is when we have to be able to notice when it's going to be disabled or not. And so this section here does the set disabled. We set the disabled of just the individual button. And finally, we do the process purchase. This is what happens when that button is actually clicked. And again, once we click on the button here, we go through and we do whatever we have to do, and we change the titles. Because let me flip back really quick to the screen on the store, the smaller screen. If you hover over the button, it gives you the total cost, and that becomes very important, because when these costs get pretty high, let me just click on this one so I can get it pretty high. Notice it's going to say 2.55K, but the actual cost is 2,553, and so on and so forth. So I've already run out of money. All right, well, anyway, you saw that. So yeah, total cost is $147,169, but you can't put that kind of large number in there, so I just truncated like to K or M and B and things like that. So that's what the process purchase does for us here, is that it changes all that information for us automatically. So when does the set disabled get called so that we can get that automatic update? Well, let's go through the whole process here. So what we have done here is we have purchased something. So when we have purchased something in a building, we're going to emit the inventory add and the stat cache, as I said before. That stat cache is going to go over to the game. Game's going to do the stat cache. But what the game is also going to do is that the stat cache is then going to report back to the game saying, hey, I now have this much cash available. And so then the game is going to come back and go to the store and say, okay, dude, I've got this much cash available to me. Do whatever you need to do with it. So it's going to set the cash, but the most important thing is it's going to set the available cash in each of the individual stores, which is right here. No big deal, just sets the individual cash. But the important thing here is this trigger all callbacks. And this is something that was within the store section, or the store UI, excuse me, that when we created the store, or when we started the store, essentially, we set a callback to say, hey, if an event ever occurs, let me know about it. And so what the store here is basically saying here, yeah, we just had an event occur. Let's try it again. And so what the store here is saying is that, yeah, we just had an event occur. That event is store update cache, and that is this new available cache. So then the store UI comes back and says, oh, okay, I got to handle that. How am I going to handle that? Well, an event callback. Okay, event callback, good. If it equals store update cache, then we'll disable purchases. So I'm going to call disable purchases. At that point, we're going through each one of the store UIs, and we're going to set disabled based upon the available cache. So we go to the store UIs, and whoops. So then we're going to go to disable purchases, and we're going to go through each one of these store section UIs, and we're going to do a set disabled. So let's go to store section UI, and that's when set disabled gets called. And here's the particular limit. And we go through each of the different limits, and we determine basically whether the inventory item, the cost of the inventory item is greater than a limit. If it is, that's how we set the disable button. So that's how the eventing works. And earlier I said in a previous video, I've got it set up well here, where there's a flow of events that go from the store to the game and over to the stat. Well, there's also a flow of events that goes from the stat to the game and back over to the store. And this is the really perfect one here to show that, hey, once the game sits there and says, you know, hey, I've got available cache here, you need to figure out what to do with it. Then the store's responsibility is to go through each one of those section UIs and say, hey, you know, you need to set that staple button. And bingo bango, it's all done. So this will also allow me, if I ever do any kind of additional sections or anything extra, I could just send events and everything is taken care of automatically. And that's pretty much all there is to the store and the store sections. I believe next week we're going to cover the world, and that may take 2 or 3 videos. So that's going to be a whole lot. What's the world we're going to be talking about? That is, let's go to the full screen. That's the thing in the middle. This part, it's big. It's going to be a lot to talk about. So we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel to view more videos. Click on the like button on this video and visit us at TheVirtuoid.com. Also, support us on Patreon, where you can get access to member-only videos. Links are down below. Again, thank you very much for watching, and keep on coding.